Data Storytellers, a much anticipated episode today on the Data Storytellers podcast. This is something that has been in the making now for a while. I mean, at least half a year since Nicole and I first met in the great city of Austin, Texas. We had a mission in December that we accomplished together successfully, which we might reflect on a little bit today. But since then, something was coming. It was something that we could see from the horizon. And today it's becoming a reality because we are going to reflect on her professional journey, mainly in the context of the data-driven business transformation at Emerson. Nicole attended our masterclass, brought great value to the conversation already, and now we get to share with the community some of the nuts and bolts and the inner workings of what made that transformation successful from her perspective. So, Nicole, without further ado, welcome on the show.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, it was a great class, obviously, that I enjoyed very much, and made a lot of great connections and a lot of great insights that I was able to gain. And hopefully, like you said, was able to share some of my experience as well. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Nicole Coolidge, director of our data analytics program here at Emerson. I've been with Emerson for many years, going on like 27 years overall. Last about 13 years within the data analytics organization. So as you know, we'll be talking about today, a lot of experience, a lot of different, journey and success and challenges along the way through that journey, and a lot of things we've experienced that I hope to share in sort of learnings and things, I think that have shaped and grown our organization along the way. And, I think, in a lot of ways that I want to share today, certainly have made us stronger as an organization and taught us a lot just in this 13 years. So, yeah, very glad to be here today and excited to share some more.
No, that's fantastic. And I think we don't need a better introduction. This was an unplanned, great little trailer for what's about to go down. And actually, what I like to do on the podcast, especially, is that before we dive into the details and the playbook and really investigate those factors of success and how that might be implementable for anyone who's listening who are in a position to take advantage of these insights, I always like to look at things through the eyes of the professionals, right? Mm-hmm. So that's because that's where I see how the profession is being driven forward. It happens through the people driving the transformations. I think it's a very simple statement. It shouldn't be controversial, but I always like to go from that angle. Not the technology itself, not right. Even the organizations, both of which are super important parts of what we're going to talk about today. Mm-hmm. But really, you as a leader, how did you meet data analytics? Like, what was that moment when somehow right. you got involved?
Right. Yeah, it was. Very interesting. Certainly, within our organization, within Emerson, it was really the first opportunity within the company to start it as a corporate initiative. For many years within the company, just because of the way that the company has been organized, there were a lot of different sectors of, at the time, we kind of referred to it as business intelligence. And so there were business intelligence pockets, all kind of disparate groups and doing things, the way that, for many years have been done. So a group, maybe a product organization, a, world area organization. And so the thought was to try to instead set up a centralized organization to start to, try to build out that knowledge and centralize it for the purposes of let's, build it out and leverage a lot of that experience and hopefully, build together and collaborate more as a group and also with the opportunity, of course, to say, here, if we need information as Emerson, we can quickly be able to provide that to our leaders, to our internal customers, and provide standard information and be more nimble in terms of data and provide data right insights, more quickly, with the, known, thought process that IT is very slow, and let's make it quicker to be able to
Hmm.
get data to our leaders and make decisions faster. So, like you said, I came into it at the time where it was new, and so I would say, with that, there was a lot of initial challenges right there, and it's new, and it's who are you and what is this, and how are you going to do this, and so breaking ground, of course, comes with a lot of well, how is this going to work, and can this work, and how are you going to try to come up with a standard when we don't have standards and everybody's done things differently for so many years. And so it was definitely a long, hard road to try to work through that. Kind of reflecting back on that starting point, one of the things that I still see, we didn't probably have in place, and I'll just jump right to, looking backwards right away, was lessons learned. One thing we didn't really kind of take into account was the amount of change, right?
Mm.
That right away, we were getting into, and we didn't maybe have a full appreciation of how much change this was going to put on to internally, because we
Mm.
were like, this is amazing. This is going to be great. Isn't this going to be
Finally,
great?
finally,
Right.
we have
We're
access
so
to objective
excited.
truth. Yeah.
Right. Right. This is amazing. I was like, yes, I love it. I'm always like the energy and let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And then it's like, whoa, not everybody's maybe there yet. And that was something that was, came out kind of quickly, is that not everybody was there in
Mm.
that space and that perspective initially. So yeah, that was the first. And boy, then, kind of then, like you said, technology, kind of right away came to be a learning point. A lot of trial and error through that journey in the first couple years. And as a company our size and data our size, we learned very quickly too that we needed partnership in the technology space to match our size. And so some mistakes there, lessons
Hmm.
learned there too, to understand who you're partnering with, and choices there as well. So a lot of, again, lessons learned.
This is going to be so exciting because first of all, I'm going to also pull up your LinkedIn just so I can see the actual times of so I can kind of place it chronologically
Yep.
of
Oh
oh,
yeah. When did we start?
yeah,
And
right, because
yeah,
so you've been with Emerson altogether how long?
27 years. Yes. It doesn't.
27.
Yeah.
It does. Okay, it doesn't show. Okay, 27 years, and it was so in general, is it fair to say that it kind of started in IT project management?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When I came
Hmm.
in, yeah, about 13 years ago, was to start as a program manager within
Hmm.
this data space. And it
Hmm.
was because it was, we've got this new, data analytics program. So come on in as a program manager to this. And then, it kind of quickly became, oh, this maybe isn't, maybe it's more than a program manager.
Hmm.
Maybe then it was transition into more of a data analytics manager. And then again, kind of quickly morphed into other things as we learned more
Hmm.
about what what we kind of bit off is.
No, this is great because then it kind of transitioned into more concrete like BI and analytics, and what I like also about your role, right, is that it was data management and analytics, BI and analytics, and now the role itself is director of data management, analytics, and insights, right? So,
Yep.
okay.
Right.
So you remember Dayon from Austin?
Yes.
So yes, VP of Data and Analytics at FanDuel. He used to be a head of analytics at Google. Like great energy, great guy.
Yep.
The most difficult thing about working with Dayon is that we always, let's say, when we schedule out to 2 hours or 2.5, we just spend an hour like off the record so that we need to squeeze in the recording. There's just like so much to talk about on all kinds of things. But
Yeah.
now he's bringing another story to Nashville, kind of building on what he did in Austin, which is operationalizing data strategies and how
Mhm.
and the lens through which you should look at it, and actually how it breaks down. It sounds very much consistent with your role, because like one of the elements would be the data architecture. So just in general, like everything from data quality and engineering and governance, like everything that has to do with the data actually it's not even data architecture, it's data infrastructure,
Right.
and a part of it is data architecture and
Right.
also other
Exactly.
things like data governance
Exactly.
and all that. So that's on one
Exactly.
side, and then you have the data products,
Yep.
which is not, you're building data driven solutions for the partners. Like what kind of solutions are you building? That's hardcore analytics conversation.
Yeah.
Again, when we talk about these things, the nuances are very, very fine, right?
Yep.
But and then you have the insights part at the very
Yep.
end of how will that insight like drive that action? How does that meet the business in
Right.
that deep, intimate way? So it sounds like we can maybe during that time we can zoom in on those and figure out like, how did you approach those kind of categories, and that was, I imagine, an evolution of this whole progression of, the
Totally.
classic prescriptive and then descriptive, and then actually descriptive and then prescriptive, and then you have the integrated analytics and all
Yep.
that. So, or predictive, descriptive, predictive, prescriptive. There are different ways to slice and
Yes.
dice this. In the
Right.
data storytellers community, we often talk about the integrated analytics layer too, which is one of our community members, Francisco Rios from Microsoft Game Studios, introduced, which is something that we just use as a tool sometimes to conceptualize certain transformational priorities. Um,
Hmm.
so, with that, when this whole thing started, so how did the evolution of data architecture, data infrastructure come into play? Because probably that's kind
Right.
of how it started, right? And then you guys were looking for ways to find business applications of that.
Right. Right. Yeah. So yeah. So as far as we started, it was building this kind of smaller team at the time. It was we're going to start this idea of a centralized organization. It was pretty small. And then we started with we're going to do a data warehouse. So it was the from scratch, and then I'll say I'm going to jump ahead probably that from that to 5 years in, it was okay, well now we've got some operational reporting too, and now it's like okay, there's kind of a broader scope of what this entails, and then it was beyond that. Now wait a minute, now what about all these other disparate systems? And then well, let's broaden it to try to capture all of it. So now we have an idea of what that whole landscape looks like, because obviously there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
duplication here. So maybe it makes more sense for us to keep things maybe as a whole unit. And we went through a lot of transformation. We called it out as just digital, the typical kind of digital
Mm-hmm.
transformation work. And around that time is where I'll say I moved into the director role. So that was about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely fast forwarding it to that point, which is where I would say, it was a point at which where then we had to really make some fast paced transformation into our team, which I think has been, extremely helpful for us to be able to move faster in the
Mm-hmm.
direction of, to your point, where we want to get to in terms of being able to move to where the business is expecting us to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we were certainly lagging behind, in my opinion, as far as being able to get to even just those conversations as far as predictive type of analytic
Mm-hmm.
efforts with what the business is looking for. So when I say digital transformation, we changed everything. We
Mm-hmm.
changed how we were organized when we consolidated people out of the business units together. I mean, we pull people out of business unit roles into what we would refer to as like our corporate group,
Mm-hmm.
and move them in and put them in different roles, and said, okay, well, now you're going to be in this type of group, and instead of supporting this, you're going to be supporting a different need, and you're going to be working with a different set of users. You're going to have different roles and responsibilities, and it's a huge shift. Some of these
Mm-hmm.
people have been doing the same type of work for 20 years, and now we shifted everything. And so it was a pretty big move to do that. And so organizationally, we changed a lot. We changed our processes. We've used a lot of work we did within like a safe agile
Mm-hmm.
methodology to implement that very, very quickly. We changed a lot of our processes as far as tools and technologies that we were using across of our groups. We just changed our whole, I'll say, strategy about how we're going to move forward as an organization. Communication, how we're going to communicate as an organization outwardly to our customers. So that was a huge shift that took us a good year to kind of work through that. So a big, identity change outwardly for our users. So who are you? So
Mm-hmm.
this was new to come up with a data management analytics, persona
Mm-hmm.
to our customers. So
Mm-hmm.
totally new. And then from there, what we got to then do at that point, kind of once that stabilized and everybody, got to be comfortable with that change, because that was pretty big. Then we got to then add in and enhance, to your point, things around architecture
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and really start to refine and manage our architecture, especially as we know in this space, so much continues to evolve. In particular, like you said, in order to be able to operationalize anything we're trying to do right now, it's that architecture is extremely important for us to have that focus. And we are continuing to evolve into a lot more SaaS solutions, and understanding what that means from a data perspective has got to be, a lot more considerations for us, and where we manage that data. What does that mean to be able to manage data collected with other data that we're needing to bring together for our users? So architecture has been another kind of focus that we've been able to do now that we're, I'd say, stabilized around that organizational transformation. We've been able to also bring together, more focus around some of our visualization practices, around things around security practices. These are what we refer to as work streams, so that we can focus in specifically around these work streams, in addition to some of our business or domain functional areas of focus, such as like finance or supply chain that we want to deliver, and have that domain expertise with. But being able to then, layer in these, kind of consistent, how do we consistently deliver, whether it's, to finance or to supply chain, we have to have kind of a consistent foundation of, like I mentioned, architecture, security, visualization practices, just being able to manage, for example, access controls, things like that. We've been able to now kind of layer that in. So, like you said, we talk about data, like you said, operationalizing our data.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely because we're so big as an organization, and able to speed our delivery process right to our users. It's like we understand we've got to get faster about this.
Hmm.
So
This is so cool because I have a bunch of questions, and I already see that the time that we have today is going to be tight. So, so with the whole framework that I just mentioned about the infrastructure of which architecture and governance and all that, and then data products, and then we have the insights and all that. So how you started the story was more about, well, the business structure itself and the operating model of data and analytics, which I would
mhm.
love to ask you that over that period of time that you've been there, how did that transform the operating model, or did that transform at all? Did you guys lay good foundations? Did they need to be shaken up at some point? You still remember probably from Austin that the last case study from Kyle Herman from Nestle was something that was almost very controversial with the
Right.
audience, right? Because of
Yep.
how they organize themselves within the business. That
Hmm.
particular hub and spoke model ruffled
Hmm.
a lot of feathers for some reason, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's a very interesting conversation to be had there. Now, in
Yep.
that context, there's something I would like to maybe spend a second on. It's because when we did the podcast with Lance Goldsmeyer from Dairy Queen, so he's the VP of Data and Data Analytics and BI there, and he's been there for 10 years.
Mhm.
And when we walk through their 10-year journey of how he was leading that transformation, what he found useful and relevant, and what did they focus on, what were the lessons learned and the mistakes made. Uh, Actually, Dairy Queen as an organization, like what Dairy Queen is, was a super relevant part of that reflection, right? So I didn't know before. And actually, something I ran into, not even because of the podcast, but I just saw in one of those LinkedIn graphs that Dairy Queen is the oldest fast food chain in America by a lot. I have no idea. I mean, in Europe, we don't have a Dairy Queen. I mean, since I'm living in North America, I've known about Dairy Queen, but I didn't know about the history of it.
Yeah.
And basically, if you think about the 60s, I'm going to kind of paraphrase those stats, but in the 60s, there was something like 10 times more Dairy Queen than McDonald's and KFC and Burger King combined. It was that, and it was an important part of that whole discussion of data analytics. When did that happen? And then how did the business embrace and receive the new technology? And what did the leaders
Mhm.
do to facilitate that change
Right.
in a positive direction? That's actually what I see the data storytellers community to be about at the end of the day, to look at those transformation stories and craft out these playbooks. And so, can you just tell a little bit more about Emerson? Emerson, not
That's
everyone knows. And how old is the business? What do you guys do? Because I can already see that when you said, wow, that took us like a year to work through. And you're talking about a massive process revamp in a huge old organization, right? So the fact that it's only a year is extremely impressive. But for you, it's like, it took us a whole year, right? So maybe the business itself has a very much process oriented history and internal culture and infrastructure that maybe on that front makes these transformations more feasible. And then you have
impressive.
challenges on the other fronts, right?
It is. And I would say, yes. I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, being with Emerson for 27 years, I have an appreciation, like you said, for, the culture of Emerson. And I would say, when I started, it was known for, certainly I would say as an engineering company, you know, very methodical in its, sort of background and practices as, everything was just, it was known to be a big ship, right? To move it. And it was just that, we were going to do things slowly and, stable. And, that was kind of, known to be, right. And kind of the, kind of pros to that, right? And that it's, that's the way things are. And it's,
Mhm.
done as that sort of, mindset. And, now I would say, it's certainly a lot of change in the last several years within Emerson as far as a company leadership and and strategy wise and certainly our direction more in the software space I think kind of lends in that kind of different approach to things and more kind of maybe speed and things maybe being done differently as well kind of, so it's different certainly than it should be 27 years ago when I joined but I would say yeah I mean it is a certainly a large company and like you said transformation quickly in a year certainly in this organization as large as it is it's pretty impressive
Mhm.
I would say the impetus for the change in terms of now we're going to make this change, now we're going to consolidate and centralize things as a hub.
Mhm.
Um, it was really a top down choice
Mhm.
and direction, and I would say it was tough for some. It
Mhm.
was not like you said; it was kind of ruffling feathers and I think it's like I mentioned earlier it was maybe not an understanding of how much change that meant
Mhm.
for people to change that and a lot of historical solutions in place that people were loving and caring for many years that hard to kind of understand what does this mean
Mhm.
so, but I still certainly believe in that strategy. I think it was the right thing
Mhm.
to do, as hard as it is. And so I think that decision almost had to have come top down
Mhm.
to move us forward. And that's where I feel like, it's almost that take the risk, make that move and, take that modernization spark, right, to keep us moving forward. So,
Absolutely. So while you were talking, I also did a quick search on Emerson.
oh, yeah.
I mean, you guys were founded 1890, so you're
Yes.
134 years
Yeah, I was
old
going to
and
say we're going
change.
up to
Is
the
that good math?
150-year
Yeah.
mark.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, there you go. So, I mean, I know because we work with some of these companies like Caterpillar, some of the old
Yeah.
finance firms.
GE.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's kind of like if you think about it. Sometimes I bring these basketball analogies, but it's kind of like a historied NBA franchise. It's like a
Yeah.
Boston Celtics or a Lakers, where every decision is a historical decision. It's just like big enough in a company. There's a lot of responsibility with that. There's
Yes.
a culture, there are a lot of people with, I'm sure that there are some employees there with generations of people working with the company, in the company, right? So these waters are not easy to navigate, especially in the modern world, and then data analytics. So how did data analytics become a an asset in Emerson when the company really realized and started to kind of invest in it as this, okay, data analytics is something that we need to prioritize? And what were the main triggers and movers of that, you think, that the top leadership
Hmm.
did set aside resources and time and attention dedicated to analytics? What drove that, you think?
I think, really, I think that the awareness from, certainly I would say from a finance perspective,
Hmm.
I think awareness in that, that a lot of it, we always said, comes and starts from a finance side of things, right? They understand too that it takes them so much time to try to collect that because we are like I said, such a large organization, but it's a lot of acquisitions. I mean, which is well known, obviously, for Emerson. And so, because we are an acquisition based solution, we have a lot of different ERP systems out there. And so, in order to, try to collect at a moment's notice, right, how are we going to find our sales? Or, it's very difficult. And so, if you want to even get down to a lower level of information about any of that, it's very difficult.
Hmm.
And so, I think that is where, the awareness and the investment, opportunity, becomes a wow, if we can make this easier,
Hmm.
the return, would seem to be pretty clear on that. So, the number of people hours and time and effort being spent and, can we do different things, right? If we make this, or, something we could do systematically, if we can invest in that, there's so many other things that we could be doing. And boy, the value of being able to get those data insights, for us, at the tip of our fingers, and for our leadership to be able to have that, I think finance was a really big part of that drive
And
to take that forward.
And by finance,
Mhm.
do you also mean like your finance department
Leaders.
and the finance leaders? Okay, and you
Hmm.
guys work with them because this is also like
We
one of
do.
those things that I love leaning into. I just spoke to one
Yeah.
of our other TDS alumni, Colleen Wagnatz, who is at MMP, so the tax company,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yeah.
and it's fascinating to see there that kind of finance driven culture. It's not a bank. It's not that kind of financial service,
Yeah.
right? That
Right.
culture. How does data analytics play a role there?
Right.
And so here you guys partnered up with finance, and they already had a seat at the table, right?
Yeah.
In these big decisions. So
Yeah.
if finance said had a weight, and people say,
Yes.
well, if finance says so, then that's a
Then this
strong
is a
indication that that's the way to
It
go.
is very
Mhm.
much, and I think though, and I would say that was to me like the biggest push we've had in
Interesting.
recent, I would say, kind of recent history. In past, we've also had some really strong participation leadership within our supply chain organization. They've also been a big seat at the table. We've kind of, in different times, kind of had some back and forth, kind of in their engagement with us. But in more recent times now, they're the finance organization, like you said, is, they've got a big drive, they've got a big need for it, and I think that is where it's making a big difference for and seeing the value. I think they're seeing the value, they're seeing the potential, and it's like that is a big difference maker.
So this is fascinating to me because this theme of building strategic alliances within the company keeps coming up, right?
Yeah.
In terms of breaking down silos, again, one of those cliches being thrown around, but what does that
Yep.
actually mean? How do you break down those silos? And then also repositioning analytics in the business. Like, how can you gain that position where you get to deploy these data-driven solutions into the business in a way that it's actually well received? How can you create that environment for it? And by building these strategic alliances is just the best way to establish yourself as that collaborative business partner that will you don't sometimes you don't even need to get that seat at the table because your champions and your allies will fight for you.
Right. Exactly. Right. And being like you said, it's just like, and I really feel like, again, back to that master class we had in
Mhm.
Austin, that was one of my, takeaways. It was that, being a partner and understanding what that means is just continuing to talk about that with my organization too. I mean, that was one of those like, okay, what does this mean for us? And how do we continue to reinforce that? Because like you said, we're in this space now with our finance group and our finance leadership. So let's keep thinking about that and how best to continue that. So, yep.
Okay, this is fascinating to me. And then basically with that, you had that leadership support,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So do I understand it correctly that first you kind of prepared the business and set up a change things, prepared things so that you
Yep.
can deploy?
Yep.
And so how did that look like? You came in with this mandate. What was the process of getting people on board?
Getting say it again.
Getting people on board, actually getting the individuals who now needed to change how they work to actually not just say yes, absolutely, but just facilitate and implement that change.
Yeah. As far as like your team, our team, my team,
Yes.
kind of talking to them about
Mhm.
getting them on board. It was, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of, I would say a lot of, really one-on-one meetings with people. I mean, there was a lot of time spent really talking through people with the change that they were going through. I mean, there was a lot of team meetings as well. We had a lot of full group town hall meetings also to talk through, explain our strategy. I always feel like there's a importance of top down messaging, meaning talking about here's our CIO message, here's an Emerson message, here's our CIO message, here's how that relates to our
Mm.
data analytics message, our goals. So you can see our relationship all the
Mhm.
way through. So as our Emerson CEO speaks, you can see us connected into that message. So as you are working on, a task, a feature, a user story, you can see how that connects into that top level message. So that's the kind of town hall um, marketing messaging that I feel is really important, so that people understand. We might have made a change to your reporting structure. We might have made a change to the people that you're working with, your peers that you're connecting to now, or how you're doing your day to day work, you know, with the DevOps, tool. But we want to make sure that you feel connected into an Emerson strategy and that you're feeling like, okay, I make a difference when, like I said, our CIO speaks and he's talking about, the great things that the company's doing during the quarterly reviews and quarterly updates, you still feel connected into the results of that. So that's where I feel like it's important to make sure that with change, as we made those changes, there's still that sense of connection and stability in a way that you're still a big part of the success of Emerson, even if we've made a shift in some of your responsibilities or your, like I said, your reporting structure
Mhm.
potentially.
And I love this because, and we'll also return a little bit to the strategic alliances bit, but this session I already took a bunch of notes on this. So, this idea of aligning messaging and instilling the right sense of mission and really implementing the right narrative in which, like, what kind of role you play in the business. In fact, when we talk
Right.
about storytelling and why the data team sometimes just kind of loses that connection with the business and things are not clicking, is because the data teams don't understand themselves. The
Right.
data analytics teams don't really know what the business is, what role they play in that business, what is their
Right.
potential in that business, what kind of posture they should assume, what are we aiming at, what are we shooting at,
Exactly.
what does great look like, what is it that we can achieve together. Like, a lot of times those things are missing, and then they have an identity crisis, so they don't have the right place to tell any stories from to begin with,
Right.
right? So they
Right.
kind of they get tripped up before we can talk about, how to structure a narrative and then how to ask the right questions. So I love this bit because it's often overlooked. It's often overlooked. How did you guys conceptualize that? Did you let that kind of organically, like, drive itself, that role of data and analytics, or did you have a vision that you kind of agreed on with your leadership team, and then you kind of led the rest of the group there?
I'll say I've seen it modeled once before.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it meant a lot. And I was, kind of in that, like, I
Mm-hmm.
need to feel like I can understand, like you said, what I'm working on and how does it connect into the understanding of what we're selling, what we're doing, and how am I going to be able to speak to it when somebody asks, what does Emerson do, right? And it's like, I don't, how am I going to explain that to somebody, and what
Mm-hmm.
is my job, and make the connection, like you said, to when somebody's speaking at that top level. And so for me, it just kind of makes sense in terms of being able to also, especially I'll kind of take it one more place with that question, because I think it's especially important in this space because so much changes. And I've shared with you, we've had a lot of change in this area, and I think it's super important when we do see a change or something maybe new comes in, or maybe what seems new. It's kind of going back to that same storytelling and say, okay, I know we've got something else maybe that came in as a new message or a new challenge for our group. And what might, to me, maybe for other people, would be like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with that now? Do I stop what I'm doing? Is that meaning I'm doing something wrong because somebody just said I'm supposed to do something else? And it's like, well, it's kind of like, wait, let's go back to the story,
Mm-hmm.
right? And let's talk about that story, and I can help you with that as, a leader. And let's take it back to, again, let's talk about the top level. What is Emerson trying to do? How does it connect to what our strategy is? And let's talk about maybe that new challenge, that new goal, and how does it still fit into what we're trying to accomplish? And I think that that storyline is still really important, even if we get change kind of, sometimes thrown at us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I think the storyline still is really important to make that change okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
And I think that that to me is always the really important thing to help everybody, including myself, be able to message it, to people, and, like I said, to myself, and, make it happen. Right. Because it's kind of like, okay, a new challenge, a new thing, and we're going to do it. And how do we tie it and connect it still ultimately to, what our strategy is to make Emerson successful?
so this is fascinating because basically what you're doing is that those successes and the failures and difficulties and challenges, the good and the bad that you go through as a team, you contextualize that. And with
Hmm.
that contextualization, you drive value from it. Because if a mistake or a missed opportunity is being looked at through the right lens, right, that is translated into uh, uh, process efficiency,
Totally.
you see. But then if it's not contextualized, then that fleeting moment is gone before you realize, right? And the
Right.
successes as well, to really capitalize on those successes, to
Yep.
make them lasting, to understand the successes and make them even better in the future.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so I love this, and I already took a note here that this is basically a mission map. You need to have a
Yep.
mission map in mind, and the mission map is basically the building fabric of it is stories: the story of the organization, the story of the different functions, and the story of the leaders, the story of the individual contributors. Everything kind of comes together in
Right.
this what we usually call the data story engine that we
Right.
have
Right.
in the company. And that's maybe in natural we'll do a fun exercise with a mission map, right? How to
Yeah.
kind of this scenario too of, okay, when something goes wrong, when you feel that something is out of place with someone, we can always just bring them back to the story, why
Right.
we're here, why you're here. And then I love it. So I already see
Right.
that the strategic alliance is a bit before we move on to whatever's waiting maybe in this third section, which I don't know what that is specifically yet, but we'll get there. But the strategic alliances, so okay, the finance partners too,
Hmm.
were they an easy sell on this idea? Because finance people already like to think in those linguistic blocks that data analytics uses, with numbers and stats, right? Statistics. Finance
Hmm.
speaks that language already, right? So, and obviously they do have that special influence within the organization.
Hmm.
Did you guys have to do a lot of legwork to sell data analytics, to create that strategic alliance with them that then catalyze your leadership mandate?
There was some, yeah, I would say there was some, maybe not as much, I think, as, you know, maybe as I was expecting, but I would say maybe one opportunity because there was some just overall change in the organization there. It was kind of some new eyes on
Mm-hmm.
it, some fresh perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just sort of the right kind of mix, right? There maybe wasn't that like, you know, all this is the way it's been, and maybe just that sort of the right, this is where we talk about the sparks and things like that. It was like, it's the right time. It was new. It was like, okay, this is how we can kind of, do this differently and take a different look at things and, new technology and new ways of, approaching it and new partnership. So it was, thing I would say, it was just kind of a ripe time for it. It was just,
We talked about that in Austin too. Like, what is that right time? What is
yeah,
that time when the change
yep,
can happen?
yep,
And okay, so there, if you reflect on it, was there any kind of unique value that they were driving from data analytics? We just happened to,
absolutely.
because I can imagine.
They were moving into something new that they don't have in place today. And so they were looking for something they needed. It was like they had a need for us
And
and they didn't have it.
mhm.
And so it was like, great. Like you need
A
our
match made in
data.
heaven,
I
right?
know. It was like,
No, that's great. But you see, you guys were there to be able to provide that unique value,
right.
to
Right.
capitalize on that opportunity.
Exactly. Right. So it was like you said, it was a match made in heaven. It was like, yep, we've got it. We know what you need. We're going to work with you. We're going to, explain some things here you might not be familiar with, and we'll work on this together. And we're still learning kind of both sides of it, right? Sort of this relationship piece of it. And,
Hmm.
but, I think it's, we're, working through it and there'll be more to learn there, but it's good. It's the right thing to do. I just keep saying so. Yeah.
And I would love to also zoom in. You mentioned Agile before and some of the visualization. Maybe we can
Yeah.
spend a minute or two there, because actually Agile is something that's being talked about a lot these days in the community, and the application of Agile. The question around lowercase a, uppercase a, Agile. So actually, one of the stories, which will be from one of our other board of advisors member, Pete Scherf, who is the VP of Data and Analytics and AI now at Coca-Cola, again, one of
Hmm.
our alumni, came on the podcast before. We just recorded our round two, and then his career playbook. A huge part of it is actually the implementation of Agile. How he leveraged Agile to build these high performance teams, and then we'll also talk about the how he drove a certain narrative towards senior leadership to drive that change, and how he empowered his team to tell these stories as well, right? So, with you, I would love to dive into that. Before we do that, so even before this podcast, we talked a lot about organizational structure and operating model, right? So, how did that change over time at Emerson for the data analytics team, like the operating model that you guys have and the organizational structure?
Yeah, I mean, it was again, I would say top down sort of, we're going to do this, and very fast. Again, very different. Like you said, culturally, it was like, well, we'll, kind of move into it maybe over a couple of years, and it was like, you got like 6 months. It felt like,
That's a
which
great idea. So
I
we
know.
can do it by 2027. So,
So it was very different than a lot of us were used to. But, always one of those things. You kind of look back, and for some of, I would say, for some of my group, we were kind of in that a little bit leaning in that direction anyways. We had taken the model off of the supply chain organization, which was very much a one in, one out process model we had used for a while, and very similar. If you look at kind of some of the background between Agile Safe, it uses a lot of that processing sort of history of supply chain, not batching in. And so kind of moving into that was okay. It did shake up, I think, a lot of, okay, we're going to do this. We've got to do it. There was no choice.
mm,
It was we're going to do it. And so once we all kind of said, okay, this is it, getting past it, once we kind of cut past it and everybody went through the learning curve, as sort of painful as it was initially, everybody now, I would say, we're like, thank goodness for it.
mm,
Some of the things we I think appreciate now more than anything would be like the transparency, just the everybody's in, because for us we have nearly 100 people all together in our organization working in ultimately in the same group, but we need to be able to understand everybody's work. It gives us that clarity. So we like it. I would say the thing I still see gaps on is that our business, we did this in an IT organization. The business is still not, they did not get enough training
mm,
on that process at all.
mm,
They are very confused by it. As much as we try to articulate this, there are still pockets of people that just, they're still used to just, I want it tomorrow. I want it. I don't understand what I'm doing. Why you tell me I need a PI? I don't know what that is. So it's been successful. It was painful to go through, to transition it, to get everybody on the same page there, but we like it. But we do both. I will say, we have waterfall for large
mm,
projects. We do some hybrid things, but overall, we're pretty successful, I would say, at running Agile.
And actually, even with Agile, like, again, a cliche that every organization is different and all that, but it's a tool. So you can't really make it your
Yeah,
idol. It's a tool that you can implement to, like,
whatever
in the
degree.
right way implemented. It can greatly help you. We talked about
Right.
it, Austin, right? That winning this game is kind of like winning the Tour de France. It boils down to those small improvements. I just spoke to George, by the way, from World about a clinical trial too, right?
Oh,
Yeah, and he had that epiphany on stage, right? You remember, and we all kind of remember that moment. You know what I'm talking about,
I
right? And
do.
and it's something that keeps coming back. And that since he's like driving these amazing things, but it boils down to winning the Tour de France of adjusting the seat by a few degrees, and
Right.
earn a 2% efficiency there, adjusting the tire pressure, and then it will really add up quickly to the 15-20% that will win you the trophy. And agile is one of those things that
Mhm.
you can do. And then what about visualization? It's I don't. Funnily enough, even if you think about Austin, something we did not talk about was visualization. Everyone thinks, oh, data storytelling, visualization. Sure, like it's the very important part of the discussion, but we did not get the chance to get
Nope.
there, right? So that's a
Nope.
different layer. But maybe we can talk about that a little bit of the visualization journey, because it's not like it's irrelevant.
No, boy. Oh gosh, and we're still on that journey. There's no, I don't think there's an end there. Oh, boy, we have been, yeah, quite the journey. Gosh, I'll share one of the interesting things. We did do a tool swap, kind of between sort of the visualization jumps, and
Hmm.
we're very heavily into a particular tool.
Yeah.
Uh,
Probably we all heard it. You can take your pick which one it is. We all know the usual suspects. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it was new on the, pretty new on the market, kind of hit it like all
Hmm.
the, wow, we've never seen
Hmm.
anything like this before. And, we were all in, and, everybody was using it,
Hmm.
and it's great, right? And then another tool came along, embedded into, products we were using. And then, it was wait a minute, now we've got two products that seem to do the same thing. And why are we doing that, right? And one seems less, and so maybe we should just go with one. And we did the whole like, okay, well, we got to transition everybody off of one tool and onto the other, and there was pain there, right? Another change from your partners in IT, which our users are like, another implementation IT, like, can you guys make up your minds, right? Like, you're putting us in this like, the business is like, we got nothing better to do than change another platform for you IT people, like.
Yeah, that's exactly what we've been thinking about.
Right, right,
We
right,
wanted to ask if yeah,
right.
but
But which one is it now? It's like, I don't know. so, it's always interesting, right? And then not and then we of course, right, have more than that, right, as far as visualization tools. So we're certainly strong in embedded in visualization platform within our Microsoft platform. And then beyond that, we're a very heavy partner with Oracle. And so with that platform comes, another visualization tool that we're heavily invested in as far as our journey with Oracle. And, then on top of that, we've got a variety of other solutions as well, because like I mentioned, we've got a lot of legacy solutions out there. So we've got operational tools that have its own visualization front end to it. So it's 4 or 5 different types of visualization solutions to
Mhm.
support. um, Now, from a user perspective, right, we kind of get into the preference to it.
Hmm.
And then there's but if you have the data, does it matter?
Mhm.
Because some of the tools have the data connected, some of the tools don't have the data connected.
Okay.
So that's sort of, there's the sort of fit what you get or what you have to prepare. So
Mhm.
there's always a sort of, going through the use case discussion of what fits where,
Mhm.
which again is not easy for our users, because there's never the one size fits all for any one of these use cases for users.
And then you need to socialize the concept. You need to put together the story. You need to make the case around it, right, each time.
Yes.
So
Yep.
it's not a free exercise. In fact, in the community, like one of the case studies that we'll look at later this year, actually one that I did with I think Henning von Roon, who is the head of data technology, at least when we recorded, he was, maybe he's been promoted since, at TUI Travel. So TUI Travel is one of the biggest travel companies in the world. Americans usually didn't hear about it at all, but it's very European. It's like very, very German.
Mhm.
And Henning just walked us through how he identified, assessed, socialized, sold, and implemented and aligned key stakeholders around the implementation of this new cloud technology. I think it was a cloud technology, right?
Okay.
And, I mean, that's the same as a cloud technology. Now we have Gen AI, and it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. It's the same kind of process from the leadership perspective of, okay, how do we understand and how do we put this package together in a way that will get that buy-in, that will accomplish it in time. I mean, again, it's an old German company, and he did it end to end in 6 months. It was a big deal too for a lot of different people, and a lot of people involved, pockets involved, business strategy, in fact, all that. And how did he do that? And how did he manage to do it in a way where there was no buyer's remorse, where there was a successful integration because of all that work he done? And he's not just 2 years very German, but he had a very like structured approach to how he organized this whole project. So we're going to look at it at some point later this year.
Yeah.
In one of the case studies, but it's funny because around visualization, I don't really hear conversations like that. But that's actually the a super important angle of your job, right?
For
Because
sure.
you're not going to be the person really like doing the last mile, right? So you're going to have to enable the team to be able to do so.
Enable team, enable users,
Hmm.
and then yeah, and then it goes kind of beyond. The other thing is, I was just in a meeting this week, and we were talking about we've got a new release of a solution for the business, and they were asking, well, how many reports? And reports is always the word, right?
Hmm.
People understand, and 300, brand new solution. I know. I saw your brow furrow. And I was like, do you need that? So to me, there's always this sort of, um, do we need like
Hmm.
the sort of visualization of what is that? What is it, right? Like
What is it going to
visualizing
accomplish?
what,
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I think there's such a mix of what we do in this area of getting information, getting data, and then truly visualizing and, like you said, understanding impact to the business. Because we spent a lot of time in this meeting this week with some executives talking about having to kind of almost ignore the whole 300 reports and start over and map out executive content and start to, like you meant, kind of what do you want to visualize and start over. And so this is going to be a really interesting kind of walkthrough because, sometimes what we hear is, well, we don't know what we want to see.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay,
Now we're
so
having the
how do
right
you,
conversation. Yeah.
so back to the story, like
Uh-huh.
what story are you trying to tell? And helping them through that, which is where it's, to me, it's so important to have we say product owners, but business analysts, right, are so important to this kind of conversation, having those right conversations, questions and understanding of that and being comfortable to ask those conversations or those questions too, I think is hard sometimes and, but challenging you know, what do you, yeah, there's so many times we see people look at things and it's like, you looked at it and you didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very common. And
Very common.
and asserting that perspective. So this story also keeps coming up. I think it came up in Austin too by Dayom, and he told that story about how after a great year he did a lot of work, was super
Yeah.
excited to go to the year end of year
Yeah.
review, and he was ready with the laundry list of everything that he
Yeah.
did. And the boss listened, and after the whole presentation, he said, "That's great. So I see all the things that you did. What did you accomplish?" And
Right.
that just hit Dayon like a bag of bricks of, oh yeah,
Yeah.
wow, I need to change the way that I look at this whole
Yep.
professional landscape. And you can be the person who really asserts that view, and people find it insanely valuable, right? Because
Right.
everyone can get lost in their own work. They get into the tunnel vision. All of us do. You guys
Right.
do. Your business partners get into that tunnel
Right.
vision, right? That's why, in a way, that's what I also enjoy about my job, that I get to be the person who sometimes just pulls people out of the tunnel vision, right?
Yep.
So a
Yep.
lot of people say, hey, I want to come to the masterclass for X, Y, and Z reason, because I have this problem. I want to solve this. I want to be able to pressure test my preconception strategies, business plan. I want to look at case studies, all that. That's great. I don't
Yeah.
like the vendors, right? I want to come because I don't like the vendors. So I get all kinds of reasons, but one of the reasons is exactly that, is that I
Yep.
feel like I'm in a little bit of a tunnel vision. I would need to get refreshed.
Right.
So that's,
And that's where
mhm.
I was just going to say, we were looking at something and it was like a, chat, whatever, version of whatever AI technology. And, and I was thinking like, okay, well, do we need the visualization, sort of concept, right? Because how many times, do you just, ask the question? I don't need to see the weather map to
Mhm.
know what the weather is,
Mhm, 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 mhm.
right? Just tell me what the weather is. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
and
need to see
it's
it.
so true, because it depends on the question that you're asking, right? Because
Right.
if what you're asking is what's the difference between the climate fluctuation, yearly climate fluctuation between Spain, Madrid, and Toronto, Canada, nah, the visualization just begs to be
Right.
just. But if you're asking, okay, I want to go for a walk. Is it raining, and should I wear a jacket? That doesn't need to be visualized.
Right. So like, can we maybe like tell me what kind of questions you would ask, and then if it can be answered one way, and then let's talk about the type of question you would ask, and then okay, if that's a visualization question, then we'll talk about it.
Mhm.
But I'm like, if I could type it in and it gets your answer, then I'm going to take you one way. If you type it in and ask it a different way, then I'm going to take you down a different path.
Mhm.
But I might go follow them through like you talk through a mic, and then I'll decide whether or not you're going to do a visualization solution first.
I love it because this whole section. So I don't know, these three areas emerge: the strategic alliances, and then we have the mission map and aligning the stories and perspectives. And here, with technology implementation, which is a very important part of the conversation, like how to implement technology. Well, first of all, try to torpedo the technology implementation. First of all, like try to pressure test it first, and
Right.
you will eliminate much of the workload, much of the pain, much of
Right.
the buyer's remorse, much of the tech debt as well.
Right.
Like just try to be the devil's advocate first,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
as a first step, and then once you do establish though that, oh yeah, this is what we need, that's what we need, then what's the key to land the plane?
Right. Yep.
Okay, well, this is fascinating. And anything else, by the way, with the technology implementation that you can think of in terms of the change management, especially in terms of, okay, you got the alignment, you pressure tested whether they actually need it, and you do arrive at, okay, this technology, it needs to be implemented. Do you have a an approach to how to do this? Because it sounds like you've done it a lot, right? So
Yeah.
do you have a step by step best practice on this?
Implementing
Yeah, the
any of it.
technology. And by the way, we
Oh
don't need
gosh.
to go into details because unfortunately we don't have time for that, right? I would love to. I would love to, but probably need to set up another call, right? Maybe we'll continue this in your career
Yeah.
reflection. But yeah, any other reflections that now it's been a while, right? 27 years.
Yeah, implementation of technology. Boy,
Maybe even a
again, I
concrete
would.
example that you might have had without kind of naming specifics, is just in
Yeah,
terms of.
yeah. I was just gonna say we've done. Certainly, I would say like again back to the beginning. Size wise, it's always one of those. Always match the size of your company to the size of your product. I mean, that was
Mhm.
one of the again big misses the first time through.
Hmm.
You can't miss that.
Was it like
We've done
you guys were too big for
too
something?
big, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're just, you got to know the size of your support. We've done, I mean, we moved from we say on prem to cloud. We've done so many, I'll say, upgrades, implementations. We've moved, I would say, maybe one of the things we've done well out of all of the implementations and moves we've done is we've moved away. This might be maybe controversial, but from using partners to do that work and taken much of that internal.
Yeah, that's
And
a lot of times that's the right decision.
yeah, and that's made a big difference for us. And I think once we've used that model, like we've never looked back. And I mean, we just did one maybe where we kind of shifted and we probably said we probably would have done it differently. We would have taken more ownership to do that because we know it better. We know the systems better. We're better equipped, better able to sort of pick things up, and so we're better that way to do the implementations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if you have the wherewithal to do it, big suggestion is to do it internally if you can. Train up your team if you need to beforehand. Do it internal. That's one of the things. I would also say if you can break it and fix it and break it and fix it, that's a great way to learn. We've done that. I mean, when we say break it and fix it, we've done so many upgrades in our system that we kind of said it's kind of like just learning how to do it. So if you can fix it multiple times, you sort of know it inside and out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's a good way to do that. I mean, it's internal. I think is one of the best things anybody can do is have a really good internal team that knows your application, that does the administration, but build that knowledge up. You cannot go wrong, I think, with an internal team versus a consulting partner. I'm seeing projects right now that are challenged with a transition.
Mm-hmm.
You go live and then you're trying to transition that knowledge, and there's so many gaps and
You spend time bridging those gaps. Yeah, I know.
Right.
And we had a similar. It's interesting because for us on the creative side, that was a similar process, right? Because our need skyrocketed with kind of the demand, and just as things grow and gain traction, then your needs expand, and then really scaling that, and then also working, for example, with agencies, right? The growing pains often just snapped the relationship, right? It's just
right.
didn't work, so we needed to kind of internalize it, and then find that right balance.
Right. I mean, like I said, if you can, I know it's not always, not everybody feels like it's scalable to do that, but I mean, So it's hard. I watch, like you said, the relationships, are very strained during that, and there's a lot of finger pointing, and it's like
exactly, and then it's
never really,
I would love to explore this more too, but unfortunately, coming up against the hour, and I'm going to be selfish because I want 5 minutes of your time before we jump into our next meeting. So I'm going to rob the listeners of a few more good stories. Maybe we can continue in Nashville. So it was great, Nicole. I really enjoyed it, and honestly, I didn't know exactly where we'll go because there was so much to explore. But I have some really cool things that emerged. I always like to take notes during this. I always say this corny joke that I get to now because I'm a father, that it's encrypted because only I can read it, right? So, but I will share it with you definitely of what I found during this conversation. But I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to meeting again this year in Nashville, and I'm sure we'll speak again in the context of the community conversations. And we really appreciate your insights always.
Very much the same. Appreciate it. Thanks, Lazo.